So you have a sheet that has some information on it for you just to take home. But this is kind of what we're talking about today, so I just wanted you to be aware and have some resources. Some of these are a little blurry just because they weren't made to be printed. They were made to be online. So you may want to, all the places that this stuff came from should be listed on this page. So, but we're going to start this series with going back to the beginning. Now, what we all know is that, now I'm not a huge genealogist, you know. I mean, I love to hear stories about my people, right? But I'm not really the one that goes and searching for those stories. And I love to hear other people's stories. I mean, Robin's stories of her family are just like, I love hearing those stories. And so the thing is that when we hear those stories about our own people, then suddenly we're like going, oh, that's why this, you know. You'll see people, and I just happened to see, flashed a picture of, and I can't even think of her name. It would be Drew Barrymore's like great-grandma. They could be carbon copies. Well, if she does she, you know, she obviously, the world kind of knows the story of the Barrymores, right? But the thing is that who do I look like? Who do I act like? Where do my mannerisms come from? How come I think or believe this way? There are a lot of things that we don't understand, and we just think it's always been that way. And I'm here to tell you that my eyes have been opened as I did some research. You know, like things we think have been around forever have been around for like maybe 100 years, if that, sometimes, you know. So there's lots to be learned about who we are. So we're going to start at the beginning, and we're going to start with creation. Now, we know that God created Adam and Eve, right? Created the things in the garden. There's, again, speculation that there's just so many viewpoints, right? And so there's the people who believe God created the heavens and the earth, and there was nothing before that. There are people that believe that there were things before that, but it was more like the cosmos, right? And it was the things of our universe that were used for God to create. And then there are the folks that say, hey, the world was already here, everything was, if you go back to the original transcripts, then it says things in a different way than we say it translated into English, right? And so it kind of depends on where you live, what faith tradition you have. Folks in Asia think about it, creation a little bit different than we do. But what we know is that every tradition I can think of has a creation story. And they are all very similar. There is just differences in opinion about these kind of things, right? So kind of across the board, both folks of faith, whether they are Protestant, Catholic, Buddhist, whatever, they know there was creation, right? And that there was a holy moment in that creation. Well, as Craig read for us, it wasn't just those days. You know, God started making promises, and we have to go back to the Old Testament to figure out where the New Testament comes from, right? So the great thing is that that we got to see how it transitions just in those verses from Adam and Eve and the journey that was made to get us to Abraham. Now, I didn't take you through all the genealogies, which we can do multiple times in the Old Testament, right? So-and-so begot so-and-so begot so-and-so, and they were nephew to. It's like finding the grandparents and the great-grandparents and the great-great-grandparents, the cousins, the uncles, all those things, right? And there's pages of that in the Old Testament. And why do we think that is? We think it is because it was important to them. The lineage was important. The family was important. And so it was all about making sure you knew who your people were. Now remember, when we get to Abraham, and Sarah, right? We didn't go into their name changes, but we're going to call them Abraham and Sarah. Abraham and Sarah started a revolution, right? They started a big thing. The thing is that not only did they start a family that would be a direct line to Jesus, right? But look at these handouts. We are an Abrahamic religion. Okay, that means that our basis starts with Abraham. But it's not just us. Islam started with Abraham, as did the Jewish tradition. So it all started back then, right? Have there been some changes in the midst of that? Yes, in those thousands and thousands of years, we were split into these 3 different faith traditions. There were folks in those traditions who took those faith traditions and said, hey, yeah, this is okay, but not this. So added something, took away something, believed in a different way. So you can see that Judaism, they think that Isaac is basically the leader of the Judaism movement. Because why? Because Isaac split into the 12 tribes, right? The 12 tribes became all of that area. So Islam, that would be Ishmael. So Ishmael started that and said, well, yeah, okay, I get it, but I think Muhammad, the prophet, is going to be who we listen to, okay? And it's not that they don't believe in God, because they believe Muhammad is a prophet of God, but they believe differently. And all 3 of these big Abrahamic religions have their own book, right? And then Christianity, of course, Jesus, right? Now Jesus, and we'll talk more about this next week, but remember, Jesus was Jewish. Jesus was not a Christian. Jesus was Jewish. And so we learn all about that, right? Because I think as a child growing up, I thought Jesus was the first Christian, you know? Because these things are just not detailed enough sometimes as we teach. But what we know now is that Jesus, as we grow and we mature in our faith, is that Jesus was Jewish. So you'll find on these pages, you'll find all the most important tenets of each one of those faiths, right? Of each one of those faith traditions. Who the name of their God is, what it means for them to have salvation. But also, you will notice at the bottom of the pages with the 2 brown slides, there is a thing that says small Abrahamic religions. And those are religions that are also Abrahamic and, stem from Abraham, but maybe they just didn't have the followers that these other 3 did. There's also, there's different sects of Islam, there's different denominations of Christianity, and this in the Abrahamic, this is just, again, a different spread. So good things for you to think about, to look at, to wonder about. Ask yourself questions about this, because we need to remember that God guided this to happen, right? The same but different. And I go back to Sesame Street days and think, which one of these does not belong? They all belong to Abrahamic tradition. It's just we don't necessarily all belong in the same worship space, maybe. However, we also know that there are traditions, because of some confirmation trips that we have made, who do find a way with these 3 Abrahamic religions to focus on Abraham and be able to do amazing outreach together, to do amazing youth groups together, to do amazing even worship together, right? In the basic tenets. So, it's in the devil's in the details, as they say, and that is true. So God has called Abraham to raise up a people, right? To be part of this ongoing thing. And so we're not gonna dwell on the whole Old Testament because that's just too much for us to take in. But we needed a base, right? The basics. And next week we'll do the basics of the New Testament. And we'll find out how we went from this Abrahamic tradition, this Jewish tradition, into Christianity. And we'll talk about when Jesus started being seen as Messiah and all those kind of things. So, and those are just the basics. And then we're going to get to where we can have a little more fun with this. But, you got to have the foundation. So, in the midst of this, though, we know that God has gifted us in many, many ways over the years, not only through the faiths we choose, the denomination we choose, the way that we share our faith, the way that we live our faith, all those things are part of the traditions that we have had in the past. So sometimes I always thought that it was kind of weird because our whole family worshiped at one church, even though some people drove, like 30 minutes to do it. You know what? Our whole family had started in that church. That's why they did that. Same thing with the church down the road. There were some families that went to this church or that church. Well, you knew which church was going to be full during a baptism by which church the family that was being baptized, right? And the other church would have like 15 people because family church, right? We are a family of faith. We might not all belong to the same DNA. We might not all be part of that lineage, to be great-great-grandfathers of all the young ones that are running around. But what we are is we are family in our faith, living out our faith together, loving together, reaching out together. And that's why being in the downline of Abraham is important, right? Because we learn so much through his teachings, through his life, through the way that the generations went on from there, and how to carry out faith in the midst of trial, in the midst of pain, and in the midst of joy. So welcome to the journey, and it's going to be, I think it's going to be a good one. And we can all kind of come together and share thoughts about all these things as well. But one thing that isn't quite clear yet is in the Old Testament, the prophets are telling us about somebody that's going to come, right? Somebody that's going to come, and they're foretelling the coming of Jesus. Now, they aren't sure yet. They aren't sure yet who this Jesus is, right? They just know that God has told them that there is something greater yet to come. And what we know now is that this is a new covenant that is made between us and God, between God and God's people, as he brings a Savior to wash away all those blood sacrifices and say, here is the sacrifice. This is the sacrifice. So today we are going to join together at the table. We are going to receive a gift of body and of cup, of bread and of cup, we're going to spend time at the rail or in your pew, praying and asking God to continue to guide us, to let this gift renew us to God's plan for our lives. And we're going to ask God that whatever his direction for us is, that it might be so, with God's blessing, with God's leading, and with God's provision.